Christmas morning is supposed to be magical. It's a day filled with family, warmth, and the kind of joy you only see in children's faces. For years, it was my favorite day of the year, a day where everything seemed perfect, no matter what challenges life threw at us. That morning, I woke up early, like I always do, to make breakfast for my wife and kids. The smell of fresh coffee, pancakes sizzling on the griddle, and the sound of laughter as the kids opened their gifts, it felt like everything was falling into place. It was a moment I'll never forget, but not for the reasons you might think. You see, while I was in the kitchen plating up food, my wife, Sarah, seemed preoccupied. I noticed she wasn't as excited as usual. She smiled here and there, but it didn't feel the same. At first, I thought maybe she was just tired. Christmas is a lot of work, after all. But then, I saw her glancing at her phone, again and again. Her face didn't light up the way it does when she looks at the kids. It was different, but I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe it was just family drama or a last-minute holiday surprise she didn't want me to know about. At least, that's what I convinced myself. But the odd behavior didn't stop there. She stepped out of the room a few times to take calls. They weren't long, but they were just enough. I asked her if everything was okay. She looked at me with a soft smile and said, "Just sorting out a little last-minute gift problem." I believed her because why wouldn't I? It was Christmas morning. The kids were laughing. I wanted to believe we were all happy. I wanted to believe everything was fine. I had no idea that Christmas morning would change my life forever. No idea that the woman I had shared years of my life with, built a family with, would make a choice I could never have imagined. A choice that would leave me questioning everything, our relationship, my trust, even myself. And it all started with those quiet moments. Moments I ignored. Moments I wish I hadn't. This is the story of what really happened on Christmas Day, the day my wife walked out on us to be with strangers. And what I discovered later will shock you. If you've ever wondered how someone could betray their family in such a devastating way, stay with me. I'll be sharing every detail, every decision, and I need your advice by the end of this. You'll understand why soon. This is Wild Love Story. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and let's begin. It all started like any other Christmas morning. The kids woke up earlier than usual, rushing into the living room in their pajamas, their eyes lighting up as they saw the presents under the tree. I remember hearing their squeals of excitement and thinking, this is what Christmas is all about. The smell of pancakes filled the air as I worked in the kitchen, flipping them onto plates and calling the kids to the table. I even added whipped cream and strawberries. It was a little tradition of ours. My wife, Sarah, sat on the couch with her coffee, smiling as she watched the kids rip open their gifts. She looked peaceful, happy, or at least, I thought she did. I remember asking her, "What do you think? Did we do a good job this year?" She nodded, took a sip of her coffee, and said, "Yeah, they seem really happy." It wasn't much, but at the time, I didn't think anything of it. I was focused on the moment, the kids, the decorations, the food. Everything felt normal. Perfect, even. But as I watched her, I noticed something. Her phone was in her hand, almost the entire time. She kept glancing down at it, even while the kids were opening their gifts. At first, I thought maybe she was taking photos or texting family to wish them a Merry Christmas. But there weren't any photos being taken. And every time I glanced her way, her expression was hard to read. Not unhappy, just distracted. Detached. I told myself I was overthinking it. Who doesn't check their phone once in a while, right? But then, she got up from the couch. She walked into the hallway and shut the door behind her. I could hear her whispering. It wasn't loud, but it was clear she was on a call. I called out to her, "Everything okay?" She replied quickly, "Yeah, just a small issue with a gift I ordered. I'll be right back." Again, I didn't push. I didn't want to ruin the day over something so small. After all, Christmas is supposed to be about joy, not tension. When she came back, she sat down like nothing had happened. She smiled at the kids, laughed at their excitement, even handed me her empty coffee cup and asked for a refill. Everything seemed fine again, at least on the surface. I remember thinking, maybe I'm just being paranoid. Maybe she really is just handling something simple. I wanted to believe that because who wants to think otherwise on Christmas morning? This is the one day you're supposed to let everything go, to just enjoy being with your family. But then she got another call. This time, she didn't even look at me. She picked up her phone, stood up, and walked into the hallway again. The kids didn't notice, but I did. She was gone longer this time, and when she came back, she didn't explain. She just sat down and stared at the tree. I asked her, "Is everything okay?" She looked at me and said, "Yeah, it's fine." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Something felt off. But I didn't push. I told myself it wasn't the time. The rest of the morning carried on like that. The kids were in their own world, playing with their toys and showing each other their new things. I tried to focus on them, on the joy in their faces. But every so often, I'd glance at Sarah. Her phone was in her hand again, her thumb scrolling quickly across the screen. She wasn't smiling anymore. She wasn't even looking at the kids. I thought about asking her what was going on, but the words didn't come out. I didn't want to create a scene. Around noon, I started getting the food ready for lunch. I called Sarah to help me set the table, but she said she had to step out. She told me she needed to grab something from the store, something she forgot for dinner. I asked her if it could wait. She shook her head, said it wouldn't take long, and grabbed her coat. She kissed the kids on the top of their heads, told them she'd be back soon, and walked out the door. I didn't think much of it at the time. I mean, people forget things. It happens. But now, looking back, I realized that was the moment it all began to unravel. I didn't know it then, but that would be the last time I saw her as the woman I thought I knew. The next time I looked her in the eyes, everything would be different. Everything would be broken. I remember standing there, watching the door close, and telling myself, she'll be back soon. It's just a quick trip. But as the hours passed, and the kids kept asking, "Where's Mommy?" I started to feel it. That uneasy feeling in the pit of your stomach when you know something isn't right. But I had no idea just how wrong things really were. And that's where it all started to fall apart. The calls, the time away, the excuses. Everything was leading to the truth I never wanted to face. But I'll tell you exactly how it unfolded in the next part of this story. After Sarah left that afternoon, I didn't think much of it at first. I went back to the kitchen, setting the table, making sure everything was perfect. The kids were still busy playing, their laughter echoing through the house. For a little while, I forgot she was even gone. But as time went on, I started to notice the silence. The absence. The way the house felt different without her there. I glanced at the clock, 30 minutes had passed. Then an hour. I told myself, maybe the store was busier than she expected. But even as I thought it, something felt off. By the time 2 hours had gone by, I decided to call her. I grabbed my phone, dialed her number, and waited. 1 ring. 2 rings. Then it went straight to voicemail. I stared at the screen, feeling a knot in my stomach. I called again. Same thing. I told myself, her phone probably died. But there was this feeling, this nagging thought in the back of my mind, that something wasn't right. I tried to shake it off. After all, it was Christmas. I didn't want to ruin the day for the kids. So, I waited. An hour later, I tried calling again. This time, I left a message. "Hey, Sarah. Just checking in. The kids are asking about you, and we're waiting for lunch. Call me back when you can. I put the phone down, trying to focus on the kids, but it was impossible. They kept asking, "When's mommy coming back?" And I didn't know what to say. I told them she'd be back soon, but even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't sure I believed them. By the time 3 hours had passed, I started to panic. I called her again, over and over, but it always went to voicemail. I sent her texts, "Are you okay? Where are you? The kids are waiting for you." But there was no response. I started pacing the living room, my mind racing. Was she in an accident? Did something happen at the store? Or was it something else? I didn't want to think about that last possibility, but it was there, lingering in the back of my mind. I tried to stay calm for the kids. I put on a movie for them, hoping it would distract them from the fact that their mom had been gone for hours. But I couldn't sit still. I kept glancing at my phone, waiting for it to ring. Every time I heard a notification, my heart jumped, only to sink when I realized it wasn't her. The afternoon stretched on, and the house felt heavier with every passing minute. The Christmas joy we'd started the day with was slipping away, replaced by something I couldn't quite explain. By the time the sun started to set, I knew something was wrong. This wasn't just a quick trip to the store. This was something else entirely. I called her one last time, and when it went straight to voicemail again, I felt a mix of anger and fear. Where the hell is she? I thought. I wanted to believe there was a logical explanation. I wanted to believe she wouldn't just disappear like this, not on Christmas, not with the kids waiting for her. But the more I thought about it, the more I started to wonder if I really knew her at all. I remember sitting down on the couch, staring at the Christmas tree, trying to piece it all together. The calls she took that morning, the way she kept checking her phone, the way she left so suddenly. It all started to feel connected. I didn't have proof, just a feeling, a sinking feeling in my chest that wouldn't go away. I looked at the kids, playing quietly on the floor, and I felt this overwhelming sense of guilt. I should have seen it earlier. I should have asked more questions. But now, it was too late. At some point, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys and told the kids I'd be right back. I didn't even know where I was going, I just needed to do something, to look for her, to find answers. I drove to the store she said she was going to, but it was closed. The parking lot was empty. I sat there for a while, staring at the dark storefront, feeling completely lost. I didn't know where else to go, so I drove back home, hoping, praying, that she'd be there when I got back. But she wasn't. The house was just as I'd left it, quiet, empty, except for the kids. They ran up to me when I walked through the door, asking, "Did you find Mommy?" I didn't know what to say. I just shook my head and told them she'd be back soon. But deep down, I wasn't sure I believed that anymore. That night, I sat in the living room long after the kids went to bed. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat there in the dark, staring at the empty chair where Sarah had been that morning. I kept replaying the day in my head, over and over, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. Trying to figure out where she was and why she hadn't come back. And then, around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah. Just 2 words, "I'm sorry." Nothing else. No explanation, no details, just those 2 words. My heart sank. I wanted to call her, to demand answers, but something stopped me. I just sat there, staring at the screen, feeling a mix of anger, confusion, and heartbreak. I didn't know what she was sorry for, but I knew it wasn't good. That was the moment I realized everything had changed. The woman I thought I knew, the life I thought we had, it was all slipping away. And I still didn't know why. But I was about to find out. And what I discovered next would shatter everything. After reading her message, "I'm sorry," I didn't move for what felt like hours. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it. Was she apologizing for being late? For worrying me? Or was it something deeper, something worse? I stared at my phone, willing it to buzz again, hoping she'd explain. But no other messages came. It was just silence. I wanted to call her. I almost did. My thumb hovered over the call button, but something stopped me. A part of me was afraid of what I'd hear if she picked up. Afraid that whatever she had to say would confirm the worst. So instead, I sat there, in the dark, waiting for answers that didn't come. The next morning, the kids woke up before I did. I heard them whispering in the living room, wondering where their mom was. It broke my heart. I got out of bed, forced a smile, and told them, "Mommy's okay. She'll be home soon." I didn't believe it, but I didn't know what else to say. They trusted me to hold everything together, and I couldn't let them see how scared I was. After I got them settled with breakfast, I went back to my phone. Still nothing from Sarah. No missed calls, no texts. Just that one message from the night before. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. So I did something I'd never done before. I went to her laptop. I didn't want to invade her privacy. It felt wrong. But I also felt like I didn't have a choice. I opened it, and as soon as the screen lit up, I saw her messages. They were still open, like she hadn't had time to log out before she left. My stomach dropped. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through them, reading words I never thought I'd see. Explicit messages. Plans. Details about where she was going and who she was meeting. It was all there, laid out in front of me. She wasn't at the store. She wasn't stuck in traffic. She wasn't coming back with some forgotten item for dinner. She had spent Christmas Day meeting up with strangers. 5 of them. I could see the times and locations in the messages, the plans she had made right under my nose. And then there were the pictures I couldn't unsee. Pictures of her, sent to these people, taken that morning while we were sitting in the living room with the kids. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My chest was tight, my hands were numb, and my mind was racing. I kept asking myself, how could she do this? How could she leave us, leave her kids, to do this? On Christmas? I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash the laptop. But I didn't. I just sat there, staring at the screen, feeling like my entire world had crumbled around me. I thought about the morning, about the way she had smiled at the kids, the way she had kissed their heads before she left. How could she fake it so well? How could she act like everything was fine while planning something like this? I didn't understand. I couldn't understand. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I married, was a stranger to me now. I kept scrolling, hoping, praying, that I'd find something to explain it. Something to make it make sense. But there was nothing. Just more messages, more plans, more lies. It was all there, laid out in black and white. The betrayal was undeniable. I didn't know what to do next. Part of me wanted to call her and confront her right then and there. Part of me wanted to pack up her things and throw them out onto the lawn. But then I thought about the kids. They were sitting in the living room, playing with their toys, completely unaware of what was happening. I couldn't let them see this. I couldn't let them feel what I was feeling. So, I closed the laptop, put it back where I found it, and walked away. But I couldn't just ignore it. I needed answers. I needed to know why she had done this, why she had thrown everything away. So I decided to wait until she came home. I told myself I'd confront her then, face to face, and demand the truth. But as the hours passed and she still didn't come back, I started to wonder if she ever would. That night, I put the kids to bed and sat in the living room, waiting. The hours dragged on, and the house was so quiet, it felt suffocating. I kept thinking about the messages, about the pictures, about the lies. I kept replaying the day in my head, wondering how I could have missed the signs. Wondering how I could have been so blind. And then, just after midnight, I heard the sound of the front door opening. She walked in like nothing had happened. She set her bag down, took off her coat, and looked at me. "Why are you still up?" she asked, like it was just another day. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at her, trying to figure out if she felt even a shred of guilt. She didn't meet my eyes. That was the first thing I noticed. She avoided my gaze, like she knew. Like she knew what I'd found. I stood up and said, "We need to talk." She froze. For a split second, I saw something in her expression, fear, maybe, or guilt. But she quickly covered it up. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice calm, almost casual. That's when I said it. "I know where you were yesterday. I know everything." The color drained from her face. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other, the silence between us heavier than anything I'd ever felt. And then, finally, she spoke. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But that was all she said. No explanation, no excuses, just those two words again. "I'm sorry." And that's when I realized, the woman I thought I knew was gone. And there was no going back. After she said, "I'm sorry," I didn't respond right away. I stood there, staring at her, waiting for something more, an explanation, an apology that actually meant something, anything that could justify what she had done. But she just stood there, looking down at the floor, silent. That silence felt louder than any argument we could have had. It was deafening. Finally, I asked, "Why?" It was the only word I could manage to get out. My voice cracked, and I hated how small I sounded, but I couldn't help it. I needed to know. I needed to understand why she would throw everything away. She didn't answer at first. She just stood there, fidgeting with the hem of her sweater, refusing to look at me. Then she said it, so quietly I almost didn't hear her, "I don't know." "You don't know?" I repeated, louder this time. I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, but I was trying to keep it together. "You don't know why you walked out on your family? On your kids? On Christmas Day?" She flinched at my words but still didn't look at me. That's when I lost it. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Do you even care what you've done? Do you care how much you've hurt us?" My voice was shaking, and I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I didn't care. I wanted her to feel even a fraction of the pain she'd caused me. She finally looked at me, and for a moment, I thought I saw regret in her eyes. But then she said, "It's not that simple." And just like that, the regret was gone. She wasn't sorry, not really. She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. I asked her if she had thought about the kids, if she had even once considered how her actions would affect them. She didn't answer. She just stood there, staring at me like she didn't know what to say. That was the moment I realized I was never going to get the answers I needed. She wasn't going to explain herself. She wasn't going to make this right. She had made her choice, and now we were left to deal with the fallout. I told her to leave. I couldn't look at her anymore. I couldn't stand to be in the same room as her. I told her to pack a bag and go. She didn't argue. She just nodded, turned around, and went upstairs. I sat down on the couch, my head in my hands, trying to process everything that had just happened. I could hear her moving around upstairs, the sound of drawers opening and closing, the sound of her footsteps as she moved from room to room. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart instead of my own. When she came back downstairs, she had a small suitcase in her hand. She stood by the door for a moment, looking at me like she was waiting for me to say something. But I didn't. I couldn't. What was there to say? She opened the door, stepped outside, and closed it behind her without another word. And just like that, she was gone. The house felt so empty after she left. The kids were asleep, and I was sitting in the living room, surrounded by all the signs of Christmas, the tree, the presents, the decorations, but it didn't feel like Christmas anymore. It felt like the end of something. The end of us. I kept thinking about the kids, about how I was going to explain this to them. How do you tell your children that their mother chose strangers over them? How do you make sense of something that doesn't make sense? The next morning, the kids woke up asking for her. They wanted to know where she was, why she wasn't there. I told them she had to go away for a little while, that she loved them and would see them soon. It was the hardest lie I've ever told, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them the truth. Not yet. They were too young to understand. They didn't deserve to have their world shattered the way mine had been. Over the next few days, I tried to hold everything together. I tried to keep things normal for the kids, but it was impossible. They could tell something was wrong. They could see it in my face, hear it in my voice. I felt like I was failing them. I felt like I was failing myself. Every time I looked at them, I felt this overwhelming guilt. I kept asking myself, what did I do wrong? How did I let this happen? I knew it wasn't my fault, but it felt like it was. It felt like I should have seen the signs, like I should have done something to stop it. But I didn't. She called a few days later. I didn't want to answer, but I did. I needed to know what she wanted. The conversation was short. She said she needed some time to figure things out, that she wasn't ready to come home. I asked her if she was still seeing them, the strangers she had met on Christmas. She didn't answer. She just said, I need time. That was all I needed to hear. She wasn't coming back. Not really. I hung up the phone and sat there, staring at the wall, trying to come to terms with everything. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, was gone. She had made her choice, and now I had to make mine. I had to decide what kind of life I wanted to give my kids, what kind of example I wanted to set for them. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about them. It was about us. In the days following her departure, I tried to rebuild some sense of normalcy for the kids. I focused on their routines, breakfast, playtime, bedtime stories. I wanted them to feel safe, to feel like everything was going to be okay, even if I wasn't sure I believed it myself. But every time I tucked them in at night, I felt the weight of her absence. It wasn't just the physical space she'd left behind. It was the questions that lingered, the emotions I couldn't put into words. A week after she left, I decided I needed clarity. I needed to figure out what to do next. I'd been waiting for her to reach out, to explain herself, to at least try to fix what she'd broken. But the only thing I'd gotten from her were a few short texts, vague messages that said she needed time and space. No apologies, no explanations, no promises to come back. Just silence. I decided to talk to a lawyer. Not because I wanted to give up on the marriage, but because I needed to protect the kids. I didn't know what she was doing or where she was, and that scared me. I couldn't let her come and go as she pleased, disrupting their lives whenever it suited her. The lawyer told me to start documenting everything, her absence, the messages, the phone calls. He said it would help if things ever went to court. I hated the thought of it, but I knew it was the right thing to do. I had to think about the kids first. But then, just when I thought I'd started to find my footing, she called again. This time, her tone was different. She sounded angry, defensive. She accused me of turning the kids against her, of making her feel unwelcome. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything she'd done, she was trying to make me the bad guy. I stayed calm, I didn't want to argue, but inside, I was furious. I told her that all I'd done was tell the kids the truth, that she needed some time away to figure things out. She didn't respond. Instead, she hung up. The next day, I got an email from her. It wasn't what I expected. It was a list of demands. She wanted to see the kids, but only on her terms. She wanted me to stop asking questions about where she'd been or what she was doing. She said I had no right to interfere in her life, that she was still their mother and deserved to be part of their lives. It felt like a slap in the face. She was the one who had walked out. She was the one who had chosen strangers over her family. And now, she was trying to dictate how things would go moving forward. But the real betrayal came a few days later. I was scrolling through my phone, trying to keep my mind off things, when I stumbled across something I wasn't supposed to see. One of my friends had shared a post online, a photo of Sarah. She was out at a party, surrounded by people I didn't recognize, laughing, drinking, looking like she didn't have a care in the world. It wasn't the photo that hurt the most, though. It was the caption. Someone had tagged her and written, "Had the best time with this queen last night. She deserves the world." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. She wasn't figuring things out. She wasn't taking time to reflect or work on herself. She was out living her life like nothing had happened, like she hadn't abandoned her family. And the people around her, they didn't know the truth. They didn't know what she'd done. To them, she was just another single woman, free to do whatever she wanted. I wanted to call her. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but I didn't. I knew it wouldn't make a difference. She had already made her choice. She had chosen herself over us. Over me. Over the kids. And there was nothing I could do to change that. That night, I sat down with my journal and wrote everything out. Every emotion, every thought, every question I couldn't answer. I wrote about the pain, the anger, the betrayal. But I also wrote about the kids, their smiles, their laughter, the way they still believed in magic and love and all the good things in the world. I realized then that I couldn't let her take that away from them. I couldn't let her choices define their future. They deserved better. They deserved stability, love, and a father who would always be there for them, no matter what. The next morning, I called my lawyer again. I told him I was ready to move forward. I didn't know what the future would look like, but I knew one thing: I couldn't keep waiting for her to come back. I couldn't keep holding on to the hope that she'd wake up one day and realize what she'd done. It was time to let go. For the kids, and for myself. But even as I made that decision, there was still a part of me that held on to the past. A part of me that wanted to believe she could change, that she could come back and be the woman I fell in love with. That part of me was still holding on to hope, even when everything else told me to let go. After speaking to the lawyer, I knew the next steps would be the most difficult. It wasn't just about legalities or figuring out custody, it was about making peace with a reality I never thought I'd face. I had to decide what kind of future I wanted for myself and for the kids, and every choice felt heavier than the last. The hardest part was letting go of the hope that things could go back to the way they were. I kept telling myself that maybe, just maybe, she would wake up one day and realize what she'd done. That she'd come back, apologize, and want to fix things. But the more time passed, the clearer it became that she wasn't coming back, not in the way I needed her to. She had chosen her path, and it didn't include us. I thought about the kids constantly. They were my biggest concern, my top priority. How would this affect them? How would they feel, knowing their mom had walked out? I couldn't protect them from the truth forever, but I also couldn't let it define their childhood. I wanted them to feel loved, safe, and secure, even if everything else in their world was falling apart. One night, after they were asleep, I sat down at the kitchen table and wrote a letter to Sarah. I didn't expect her to respond, but I needed to say everything I'd been holding inside. I told her how much she'd hurt us, how much her actions had broken my trust. But I also told her that I wasn't going to let her choices ruin the life I was building for the kids. I told her she needed to decide if she wanted to be part of their lives, really part of their lives, or if she was going to keep putting herself first. And if she chose the latter, I would do everything in my power to protect them from the fallout. I never sent the letter. I kept it in my desk drawer, a reminder of the promises I made to myself that night. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about us, the family she left behind. The family I had to hold together. The next day, I made the decision I'd been avoiding. I called the lawyer again and told him I wanted to move forward with filing for separation. It wasn't an easy call to make. Part of me felt like I was giving up, like I was admitting defeat. But deep down, I knew it was the right thing to do. I couldn't keep waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. I couldn't keep putting my life on hold for someone who had already moved on. When the paperwork was ready, I sat down and read every word, letting the reality of it sink in. This wasn't just a piece of paper. It was the end of a chapter, the closing of a door I'd spent years walking through. Signing it felt like ripping off a bandage, painful, but necessary. I signed it for myself, for the kids, and for the future I wanted to build without her. But even as I made that decision, the guilt lingered. I kept asking myself if there was something more I could have done, something I could have said to save our marriage. I thought about the promises we made to each other, the life we built together, the memories we shared. Letting go of all of that felt impossible, but I knew holding on would only hurt me more. Sometimes, the hardest decision is the one you don't want to make, but have to. The kids were my guiding light through all of it. Every time I looked at them, I knew I was making the right choice. They needed a stable, loving home, and I couldn't give them that if I was stuck in the past. I had to move forward, not just for me, but for them. They deserved a father who was present, who was strong, who showed them what it meant to keep going, even when life felt unbearable. A few weeks later, Sarah reached out. She wanted to talk about custody, about seeing the kids. It wasn't an easy conversation. Part of me wanted to shut her out completely, to protect the kids from the pain she'd already caused. But another part of me knew they needed their mother, even if she wasn't the person I thought she was. We set up a meeting at a neutral location, just the two of us. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew I needed to be clear about my boundaries. When we sat down, she looked different. Tired, maybe, or just distant. She apologized, but it felt hollow, like she was saying it because she had to, not because she meant it. She said she wanted to be part of the kids' lives, but she wasn't ready to come home. I told her that if she wanted to see them, it would have to be on my terms. I wasn't going to let her come in and out of their lives whenever she felt like it. They deserved consistency. They deserved better. We agreed on a schedule, and for the first time, I felt a sense of closure. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't what I wanted. But it was a step forward. I knew it would be a long road, but I was ready to walk it, for them, and for myself. It's been months since that Christmas day, and not a day goes by that I don't think about what happened. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the loss, it's all still there, like a scar that hasn't quite healed. But in the midst of all that pain, I've also found something I didn't expect: clarity. Strength. A new sense of purpose. Looking back, I realize now that I spent so much time trying to make sense of her choices, trying to understand why she did what she did. But the truth is, I may never know. I've stopped searching for answers, because I've learned that some things just don't have explanations. Sometimes, people make choices that have nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. And that's okay. It's not your responsibility to carry their mistakes. What I've learned through all of this is that forgiveness isn't about letting someone back into your life. It's not about forgetting what they did or pretending it didn't hurt. Forgiveness is about letting go of the anger, the resentment, the bitterness that keeps you tied to the past. It's about setting yourself free. And that's what I've been working on, not for her, but for me. For my kids. For the life I want to build moving forward. The kids have been my anchor through all of this. They've reminded me that even in the darkest moments, there's still light. They don't see me as broken or lost. To them, I'm just Dad, the guy who makes their pancakes in the morning, who helps them with their homework, who tucks them in at night. They don't know it, but they've saved me in ways I can't even put into words. They've given me a reason to keep going, even when it felt impossible. Sarah still sees the kids occasionally. It's not perfect, and it's not always easy, but we're making it work. I've set boundaries, and for the most part, she's respected them. I don't know if she'll ever fully understand the damage she caused, but I've stopped waiting for that. I've stopped waiting for her to change, because I've realized that the only person I can change is myself. And I have changed. I'm not the same person I was before all of this happened. I'm stronger now. More patient. More aware of what I deserve and what I won't tolerate. I've learned that love isn't just about staying, it's about showing up, every single day, even when it's hard. It's about being there for the people who count on you, who believe in you, who love you unconditionally. And that's what I'm focused on now, being the best father I can be, the best version of myself I can be. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you. Sharing this story hasn't been easy, but it's been healing in ways I didn't expect. And if you're going through something similar, I want you to know you're not alone. It's okay to feel lost, to feel angry, to feel like you don't have all the answers. But I promise you, there's a way forward. It's not easy, and it won't happen overnight, but you'll get there. One step at a time. I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that completely changed your life? How did you find the strength to move forward? What advice would you give to someone in my position? Please share your thoughts in the comments. I'll be there, reading and responding, because your stories matter just as much as mine. If you found something meaningful in this story, please don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to Wild Love Story. Your support means the world to me, and it helps keep this channel going. Thank you for being part of this journey, for listening, for sharing, for caring. Together, we're building a community where no one has to face these challenges alone. Life doesn't always go the way we plan. Sometimes, it throws us curveballs we never see coming. But those moments don't define us. What defines us is how we rise, how we heal, how we move forward. And that's what I'm doing now, moving forward, one day at a time, with my kids by my side and hope in my heart. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next story.